Hello, this is Alex from ONG Tax and Accounting Services. So in this video, we're going to focus on situations or cases where a foreign owner of US single member LLCs receives any of the series of the 1099s, so such as the 1099K, 1099NEC, 1099DIV. There's so many of them, but for the purpose of this video, we're going to focus on the 1099Ks, the 1099NECs, and then the 1099 INT, which is for interest, and 1099 DIV for dividends. So as an international tax professional, as an international tax expert, I get a lot of questions from foreign owners of US single member LLCs, and there's a whole bunch of them out there. For some reason or the other, they receive 1099s from their payer. Maybe they've performed certain type of services and they got a 1099 NEC, or maybe they are selling on stores like Amazon, Shopify, eBay, and all these other places, and the payment processing company such as Stripe or PayPal may have issued them a 1099K. So when they get this type of forms, the actual question is, how do I treat it on the US tax return? Do I even need to report it? And if I have to report it, what is the basis for reporting such income on the US tax return? So we're going to dive straight into it. You'll be able to understand your US tax obligations whenever you receive this type of forms, especially the 1099s. Now, before we start off, as usual, let me throw a word of caution out there that this video is for educational purposes only. It is not meant to be a legal or tax advice, and if at any point in time if you need a legal or tax advice, you should always consult with a competent CPA or attorney or enrolled agent who can listen to your situation and help you out. I also want to stress that this video is basically focusing on only foreign owners with US single member LLCs. Okay, we're not focusing on US partnerships or foreign-owned US corporations and stuff like that. We're only focusing on foreign owners of US single-member LLC, or sometimes the owners themselves. Now, one of the questions I get is, taxpayers or foreigners ask me, is it necessary to file a 1040 NR if the business income that's reported on the 1099 NEC or 1099K is not effectively connected with US trade or business? Now, this is a very good question. Now, I think it's important to address the fundamental issues here, right? So, first of all, before we even talk about the 1099 NEC and the 1099K, we also need to tell you that these forms are information reporting forms, okay? So, whenever a payer or a payment processor sends you a copy of these forms, a copy is also sent to the IRS, okay? So it's an information reporting form, but then it can serve so many purposes. It is one of the ways that the US is using to enforce its tax laws and also to enforce collection activities on certain people that are required to pay taxes in the US, okay? Now, so then the question is, when is a foreign person required to pay US tax, and to the extent that they have to file a US tax return? Now, a foreign person is subject to US taxes on two types of income. Okay, generally there are two types of income. Number one is income that is effectively connected with US trade or business. Okay, and then number two is FDAP income. So FDAP income falls into the category of the passive type of income or the investment types of income. Okay, so income that you don't really even have to struggle much to earn, which means that you can just sit back and then you can make that income. Now, those are type of income such as the royalties, the dividends, the interest income, the annuities, etc. Okay. Now, if that kind of income falls within the FDAP, whenever the payment is made, the payer, assuming you've given them the proper forms, okay, a foreign person will complete a form W8BEN, a foreign entity will complete W8BENE, and that tells the payer that you're a foreign person, you have a foreign status, and also if you have a certain type of income that's subject to the treaty provision and you come from a country with a treaty, you may also end up paying little or no taxes. Okay, So there's a lot of dynamics here, depending on whether your country has a tax treaty or not, and then depending on the type of income you're collecting from the US. So I gave you 2 types of income that is subject to US taxes when you're a foreign person, and that is income that is effectively connected, and then the withholdable income types such as the FDAP income, which I have mentioned some of them, such as the interest, the royalties, and dividends, etc. Now, what triggers the 1040 NR filing? Only income that is effectively connected with US trade or business, or FDAP income that is improperly withheld at source, will require you to file 1040 NR. So the first issue is whenever you, regardless of whether you've received Form 1099 or 1099K or not, okay, you need to ask yourself, the first question you need to ask yourself is, do I need to file 1040 NR? Okay. Now, and you only need to file 1040 NR when you're able to answer these questions, and you're able to answer one of them positively, okay? So the first question you need to ask yourself is, do you have income that is effectively connected to US trade or business? If the answer is no, then a 1040 NR is not required, okay? Now, you move on to the second question. Do you have income that falls within the FDAP category? Okay, to the extent that the payer, the one that paid you that type of income, did not withhold the proper taxes at source. If the answer is yes, if they did not withhold the property taxes at the proper tax at source, then you are required to file 1040 NR. So you could answer, if you say that, okay, you don't have effectively connected income, the next phase of your question is you need to move on to, do you have a FDAP income? If you don't have both of them, then the 1040 NR is not required. And even if you have FDAP income and the person that made the payment has withhold the proper taxes, then there's no tax return to file, because you've actually paid the final taxes on the source. Okay, so that is what triggers a 1040 NR filing. You must have an income that is effectively connected, or you must have income that was not properly withheld at the source to be able to trigger 1040 NR filing, regardless of whether you get a 1099 NEC or 1099K. Okay, the 1099 NEC or 1099K is just for information purposes. You have to sit down and figure out, what your level of operations are and the type of income that you're receiving. Okay. Now, a lot of the time, in terms of what is effectively connected income in US trade or business, there's a lot of information out there, and it's not really clear when a person, in some cases, it's not very clear when a person is engaged in US trade or business. And even with the code, the Internal Revenue Code has not defined what is a US trade or business. Okay, so some of these things are basically explained in when a taxpayer brings a case to the tax court, and the tax court is able to review the fact and circumstances of the taxpayer's case and able to determine whether the taxpayer is engaged in US trade or business or not. Okay, so some activities that foreigners do here is not very clear cut, and the code does not explain what a US trade or business is, but at least it gives some example. The court has also given some precedents on certain type of activities that causes US trade or business. For example, if you travel into the US to conduct any kind of business, such as signing contract, performing work at a US location, providing services at a US location, or being employed physically here in the US, you're generally considered to be engaged in US trade or business because you're physically here doing the work. Another thing is that you yourself may not travel here in the US, but you could plant agents here to do your work. And those agents, if they are dependent upon you, or they are your employees, or they are exclusive independent agents, then they could cause you to have a US trade or business. Okay, so that is just one of the things that you need to be aware of. Now, a lot of the time, based on what I have said, you can talk to many CPAs and tax attorneys, and the results or the advice that they're giving you may be really different from each other, and so you get confused. So in cases where you are unsure whether your income, okay, in cases where you are not sure whether your income qualifies as effectively connected, it is always advisable to file a protective 1040 NR. This type of 1040 NR is going to safeguard your right to claim deductions and losses later on in the future. Okay, it also starts the statute of limitation, which can also provide you with a peace of mind. Now, what does all this mean? When a foreign person does not file, assuming a foreign person have an income that is effectively connected, they got a bad advice from somewhere and the person told them, your income is not effectively connected, you don't have to file anything, right? Now, what happens when the IRS catches up with you? When the IRS catches up with you as a foreign person that has not reported your income that is effectively connected or even and pay the required taxes, first, the IRS is not going to give you any deduction, okay, or losses. You're not going to get a credit for any deductions or losses, okay? So the IRS taxes you on the gross payment or the gross receipt that you got, right? So when others are claiming deductions like, subscriptions, professional services, legal services to reduce their income so that they can pay lower taxes, you don't get the benefit of deductions and losses, okay? So when the IRS catches up with you, you pay, you pay a whole bunch of taxes. Basically, you pay double of what everybody's paying when it turns out you got wrong advice or you know that you have effectively connected income but yet failed to file the returns. That is the kind of devastating results that you may get, okay? So when you are not clear, you file a protective return, it starts the statute of limitation. Now, statute of limitation is at what point can the IRS not come after you for any kind of taxes, okay? And usually it's 3 years after you file the taxes, after the due date of the taxes. Sometimes when there's a gross understatement of your taxes, the IRS can extend it for 6 years. And then there are cases where the statute of limitation never runs, right? The statute of limitation never starts or run because you basically committed fraud, right? Or you never filed a tax return at all, then it does not run, okay? So if you want to file a protective return, it is one of the best ways to go about this issue whenever you're not clear that your income is effectively connected. And then also with a protective return, you're putting the IRS on notice. But when you file a protective return, one good thing about it is you usually don't even report any income on that 1040 NR protective return. But you need to attach some kind of a memorandum of law and attach certain type of information to the protective return to help the IRS understand why you're filing the protective return. So we've talked about cases where you're not sure whether your income is effectively connected to the extent that you have to file a protective return to protect yourself in the future. Now, there are certain cases where taxpayers know that they confidently know that they don't have any effectively connected income, okay? So if you confidently know that the kind of activities you are engaging is not effectively connected to U.S. trade or business, then there's no need to file, okay? So this approach is for those business owners or those persons, foreign persons who think their business activities do not meet the certain criteria. So what type of businesses could you say is, it's not effectively connected to U.S. trade or business? One of the most, certain type of business, one of the businesses that we are definitely certain that it's not connected to U.S. trade or business is things like when a foreign person sits outside of the outside of the U.S. or they sit in a foreign country to provide services. Okay, so let's say you're providing services like draftsmanship, or you're providing IT consulting services, or you're providing some teaching services, and all of it is done outside of the U.S. Those are foreign source income, and they are not taxable here in the U.S. Okay, assuming you do not have any employees in the U.S. helping you, you do not have any exclusive independent agents helping you out, you do not have any offices, and everything takes place outside of the U.S., then you're good. It really does not matter who is paying you, whether the payment is coming from a US person. It matters where the work is being done, okay? Another example is those that sell on Amazon, eBay, Shopify, and all of that, right? As long as you're sitting in your home country and you are doing the sales, right? A lot of the time there's a confusion on inventory sales. Now, the confusion on inventory sales is that, yes, of course, if you sell, let's say you ship your product from China, okay, and you ship it, you send it to the US, and then you sell it, you have a US source income. But just because you have a US source income does not make your income effectively connected to US trade or business. So after you pass the first stage of the US source income, you need to ask yourself, is this US source income effectively connected to US trade or business? And most of the time it's not. So if you want a deeper explanation of why it's not, why it is a US source income, but then it's not effectively connected, you can always book an appointment with me, and then I can go through the details with you and tell you as to why, it's not taxable in the US. A lot of the time, many CPAs and attorneys start with the US source income analysis, and they automatically assume that, okay, once you have a US source income, then the income is taxable. But we're not dealing with FDAP income. Sales and services income does not fall into FDAP income. It falls into active income. So when you're in the active business, you need to ask yourself, where is the active trade or business taking place at? Okay. Yes, you have US source income, but is it due to an active trade or business happening in the US? And most of the time, it's not for foreign persons. If you sit in your home country and you do all the product research, your country provides you all the internet, provides you with all the protection to be doing what you do, and to the extent that you're able to sell in the US, then you have a US source income, but you do not have effectively US trade or business to the extent that you have effectively connected income. Okay, so in that case, your income is not taxable, at least on the federal level. But on the state level, just make sure you're doing a proper analysis, because state level, many states uses sales factor. Some of them uses economic nexus to determine whether you have, whether you have any kind of substantial activities, economic activities in that state, to the extent that you may be subject to sales tax, franchise tax, use tax, or even the state income tax. But the purpose of this training or this video is to talk about federal taxes, not the state. Okay. All right. So we've talked about when to skip filing if you're confidently sure that you do not have effectively connected income, then there's no need to file. Okay. Now let's go to what a 1099 NEC and 1099K does in this situation. Now, the issuance of Form 1099 NEC or 1099K or any issuance of 1099 forms, okay, signals to the IRS that, somebody has gotten some type of income and they want to know about it. So the IRS generally expect a tax return, right? So filing a protective return can preemptively address potential IRS inquiries, right? Even if no tax is ultimately due. So this, you can maintain clarity in your tax position. So again, I started by saying that a Form 1099 is just an information reporting form. Okay, that Form 1099 does not dictate whether your income is taxable or not, but it's helpful for the IRS to determine, or it's helpful for the IRS to make inquiries as to why you are, as to why you're receiving certain type of money on these forms and you've not filed any taxes. Now, when this happens, we go through the same analysis, okay? One of the things that people will do is to file a protective return. That means that you're proactively telling the IRS that, you've received the forms and they have a copy, but you don't think your income is effectively connected. So you're filing a protective return in case they reaches out to you in the future to say, hey, what are you doing? Or is your income is effectively connected? You can actually explain whether it is or it is not. Okay. Another option is just to wait and see. If you're really certain that your income is not effectively connected, you just wait and see. You don't file anything. You just wait. And if the IRS, get back to you and ask you, need to make some inquiries about why you're not filing taxes, you explain to them. And hopefully you know the memorandum of law and you know how to respond to it. Or if you get any kind of notices like that, you can always reach out to me and then we can develop your facts and circumstances and then apply the law to it, okay? Another question is, I get a lot of taxpayers, foreign taxpayers who get a 1099 INT, and sometimes they get it from banks they are using, such as maybe Wise account or Mercury account or Brex, and they ask us, they usually ask whether if that foreign owner who is receiving a 1099 INT should be reporting any kind of tax return, such as a 1040 NR. Okay, now a 1099 INT is a form that reports interest income. Okay, if you are a foreign person and you're using accounts such as Wise, it may reflect interest and interest you've earned on the balance that the bank account is holding. Okay, now generally, foreign persons, should not be receiving 1099 INT. They should be receiving 1042S. Okay, within the 1042S, it's going to state whether that specific interest income is subject to withholding or not. And so, a lot of the time, it's becoming a common thing where the US payers are just issuing 1099s left, right, and center when they should have been using 1042S. But I also understand the frustration. Sometimes you, the taxpayer or the foreign taxpayer himself, complete certain forms that kind of misleads the payer to think that you're a US person, and therefore they give you this 1099 INT, right? So sometimes instead of certain people or certain companies completing the W8BEN series, they complete W9 and they incorrectly state on those W9 that they are US persons when they are not. So when you're a US person, then the right channel for the payer to address these issues is to give you a 1099 INT for interest income. Okay. Now, I have already stated that 1099s are just information purposes. However, you need to determine whether that type of income is taxable, and you determine the mechanics in reporting that income. Okay, so let's go straight to the fact that interest falls under income that is not effectively connected. That is the FDAP type of income. Okay, so generally interest income is not considered effectively connected to US trade or business. They are FDAP income and they are subject to 30% withholding unless the code, the IRS code itself, grants an exemption or the treaty provision applies. Okay, so on your screen you will see the list of countries with treaties with the US and some of the interest provisions, the tax withholding rate on interest and all of that. Okay, so if you don't come from a treaty country and you're receiving interest, you may be subject to a 30% withholding. Okay, now let's go to the 1040 NR filing. When I started earlier, I said the filing a 1040 NR is only essential if the interest income is effectively connected with the US trade or business. However, non-business interest from services or from accounts, from bank account, savings account, brokerage account, typically does not require the filing of 1040 NR because there is an exemption in the code, which is portfolio interest exemption. Now, portfolio interest exemptions are interests that are not connected to any business. Okay, so if you keep your money in a savings account, a checkings account, in a brokerage account, and that money earns you an interest, it is considered as a portfolio interest. And so the IRS gives exemption when a foreign person receives these types of income. Okay, so if you're a foreign person, you got a 1099 INT from banks like Wise or Wells Fargo or Chase or any of those banks, or even the brokerage accounts like TD, Ameritrade, Fidelity, Robinhood, and it's reporting interest to you as a foreign person. That interest is considered as a portfolio interest and it's subject to an exemption that to the extent that you pay zero taxes on it. Okay, so that is also by the way. Now, you can find the portfolio interest exemption under IRC Internal Revenue Code section 871I2A or 881D as shown on your screen. And they are non-business interest income from specific US sources, including banks, brokerage account, similar institution, they are exempt for foreign persons. Okay, so even if you receive a 1099 INT and it falls under the portfolio interest exemption, then you don't have to pay any taxes. Okay, regardless of whether you receive a 1099 INT or not. Now, our final question deals with the 1099 DIV, which is in dividends. Okay. Now, I must also say that in all these cases, as I have stated, a foreign person should not be receiving a 1099 DIV, a 1099 INT, and all of that stuff. I mean, with 1099K, it's fine because the payment processors usually, they usually send those forms anyways, regardless of whether you're a foreign person or not. Some services like Amazon, if you certify correctly, they are not sending you a 1099K. Amazon understand this very well, but some payment processors still, want to treat everybody equally and report 1099K, which is fine. Some companies also have, like a good companies that issues you 1099 NEC, even though you've given them W8B. And I mean, I guess sometimes it depends on their internal policies. Maybe the accountants or the attorneys have told them that, look, even if you pay a foreign person, just put it on 1099 NEC. And so they still put it on there, which is wrong. But sometimes I guess it's because of risk factors and they want to make sure that, they are not getting any pushback on their expenses when they get audited by the IRS. But, the law is the law. If the law says that the work that the people are doing from outside of the U.S. is not subject to U.S. taxes, you, as the payer, has no business reporting it on 1099 NEC. Doesn't matter what the pushback the IRS is going to give you or the agent is going to give you. You just don't report it on 1099 NEC when the person have actually gone through the pains of filling out the W8B and when you know that the work was actually done outside of the U.S. Okay, but then on the other side, if you're a foreign person and you receive 1099 NEC, it's fine. Just, look into your circumstances and determine whether that income is taxable or not. If it is not taxable, no 1040 NR is required. If you think it's taxable, then you file it on 1040 NR. If you're not sure, then you file a protective return. Okay. Now let's go to this 1099 DIV. Now, if you so this question says that in the event of receiving a 1099 DIV instead of a 1042S, what steps should a foreign-owned US LLC take to correct this error? Okay, so banks are withholding agents. Okay, banks, they act as a withholding agent. They rely on forms that you've given them, such as the W8B, and to determine an individual or an entity's tax status, right? So if you mistakenly submit a W-9, that can lead to an incorrect tax form issuance, such as the 1099 DIV, instead of you receiving a 1042S, okay? Now, what happens when you receive a 1099 DIV instead of 1042S? More likely, because dividends are subject to U.S. tax withholding of 30% if you do not come from a treaty country, but if you come from a treaty country, it may be lower. More likely, if you're receiving a 1099 DIV, means that taxes was not taken out of it. So you have to take the initiative of correcting this mistake. Okay, so this involves convincing the bank to issue you a 1042S or issue you a corrected form, which is most of the time it's not going to happen. Okay, because if the bank goes the 1042S route by correcting it, that means that they have to pay the withholding taxes to the IRS, and they've already paid you all the 100% of your money. They did not take any taxes out. So the bank usually is not going to take a hit or a fall for that taxes that should have been withheld in the first place. So most of the time you would not have, the bank would probably not correct it. And because they are of their own internal mechanism and bureaucracy, they probably will not correct it. So what you do is you go to the other route of filing a 1040 NR, okay? And then you're going to report on the 1040 NR, there's a schedule NEC, and then you use that schedule to report the dividend that you receive on the 1099 DIV, and then you pay the correct taxes depending on whether you're from a treaty country or not, okay? Now, going forward, what do you need to do? If you do not want to receive a 1099 DIV to the extent that you have to go and file a 1040 NR, then it's always advisable to avoid these similar issues, and you as the owner should ensure that you're giving these payers or these banks the appropriate forms. Specifically, you will give, if you're a foreign person or individual, you give these banks W8BEN, okay? And then if you're a foreign entity, you give them W8BENE to the withholding agent. So this makes sure that whenever the payment is made, they take out the required taxes and then they pay you the rest. And also, it helps to avoid filing a 1040 NR, because at that point, the banks would have helped you pay the final taxes, okay, by doing the withholding from the source. So I hope this touches on most of the common 1099 questions that you guys have sent to me. And if you a foreign person and you receive a 1099 instead of a different form and you still don't know how to go about it, or if you've received any notices from the IRS on any of the 1099s that a payer has reported against you, your EIN or your ITIN, or against you as a person, and you're confused on how to tackle it, you can always reach out to me and then we can come into an agreement on how to help you out. But for now, I hope this helps you out. Please click like, share, and subscribe. I'll come to you with another video. Thank you. Bye.